You should be all set.
So good evening. It is 7:02 and I call the policy committee meeting of Monday, June 20th to order. I want to first welcome Sean McAvoy and Tina Malhotra. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. And thank you all to our guests, teachers and administrators. The first policy up is RPS policy 1330, use of buildings and grounds. Who would like to lead us off in this discussion?
I'll start.
Okay. Dr. Greenwood.
Yep.
Go ahead.
So we have a current board policy that has a line in its referencing the ability of the district to require supervision to be on site when our facilities are being used. And our current contract, is contract the right word, Mac, that we have with outside people who want to use the auditorium?
Yeah, our rental agreement, it's online. So it's what they use on Google Form to sign up, and it lists a bunch of procedures.
Yep. It doesn't have a dollar amount put to that. What's happened over the last couple of years in renting out the auditorium is there's frankly been some damage to the space. And so we'd like to have a site supervisor on site to make sure that all the materials and things like soundboard, lighting board, doors are locked, etc. So we would like to add a nominal fee to our contract to put onto whomever the renter is. I believe we're fine with our current policy, but thought it best to bring it here, have you take a quick read of the current policy, see if we needed to make a change, one, and then two, if you are okay with us moving in that direction.
Okay, so
Okay.
Dr. Green, would that amount come then to the full board? Would it be written up, Dr. De Silva?
So I don't think that it would be in terms of the actually out now that I'm thinking about it, we have rental fees that we charge, but I don't think those are approved by the board. Hello, Ken. So I'm not sure that those are approved by the board. That I'll have to come back to you on, Rachel. But I think the overarching question, so that's a good one, but the overarching question here is whether or not this policy
Covers it. Yeah.
covers the ability to charge a fee to have someone supervise the space. And then I think the secondary question that we'll have to have answered is whether or not the Board of Ed has oversight over that fee that we're charging. And I don't think so, but I will find out for sure.
Sure. So just in the third paragraph down, it does say a rental fee for such use shall be charged according to regulations based on an annual fee schedule approved by the board.
So the question there would be whether or not that rental fee would include always the supervisor, right? So I think we're only thinking about specifically at this moment, at least in time, when there's a musical performance or a theater performance where you would need somebody navigating our equipment. Am I right?
Yeah, and we do something very similar with Tiger Hollow. We have site managers which work under for a fee which is charged to the renter on the weekends. And so we'd like to basically use that same system for the auditorium. And again, truly to maintain what we have, to be sure that we're protecting our assets. Which we've seen some, we couldn't, we don't know who damaged some things or left doors unlocked. And so we just feel like we need somebody, we want to use it, let the community use it, but we feel like we need an individual there.
Okay. And then I do have a question. I pulled out from November of 2020 in the budget of finance meeting, we did look at a draft of facilities use. And on that draft, it said that the forms were being completed and submitted electronically. So I was wondering if we need to incorporate that here in our policy to update it since it's been since 2009, or are applications still going to the principal of the school? Is that still happening?
So you're speaking about, I think it's not school dude, but it's something with the dude, facilities dude.
Facility dude, yeah.
Facilities dude. So that is a process that they're using. And I think if it's my understanding, Jake, then it goes through building, the building approves it, looking at their calendar. I don't know about the fee schedule and how that's associated. And
I guess they're two different.
Yeah, so you know, you gotta let Mac chime in. So basically, any of the facility use goes through me. Anything having to do with the auditorium goes through Mac first. Mac has a stipend in order to maintain all of auditorium rental. So he takes care of every rental goes through him first. He checks the calendar, makes sure that all the materials are in right. We have the right lighting people, the right sound people. Mac does all of that ahead of time. So that's the only caveat is auditorium rentals do go through Mac before they come to me. And there's a bunch of people that sign off on those first, just because it's such, again, we you know, we've invested a lot of money in the space. And so we want to make sure that it, you know, people using it have proper oversight. And
So
that's
I
during the school year, but I'm talking, Mac and I are talking a lot more now about, for instance, the summer. When people are coming in the summer, there's not somebody in there, and they're wanting to use it, and the custodian can open the door and check in on them, but we don't have an actual staff member who knows the equipment, who's assigned to be there and maintain the space. And we really are finding that to be, you know, it just leaves us exposed in terms of maintaining our space, frankly. And it would be a nominal fee. Mac, did you want to chime in on what you were thinking for that piece?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of almost depends on who we're having do it. Like you could. I mean, there's kids that are trained to run that equipment through our theater program. You know, but then when COVID kind of put the kibosh to musicals, we don't have any current kids that are trained, so we need to retrain kids. But it doesn't have to be much money. It could also be like there's certain approved vendors that we use. Like Chroma Design is pretty much the only show in town when it comes to lighting and AV. So most people use him. He's an RHS graduate. He intimately knows our stuff and our rules and all of that. And I would feel comfortable with them, you know, with him being kind of the person to look at that. So it depends kind of on how we want to go about it. You know, like it could be me, it could be another adult. And I think who you're getting there then depends on what the fee would be. You know, like he's going to charge $50 an hour to have a guy there, you know, but if we had a kid do it, we could probably get away with like $20. So I'm not sure what the answer to that is.
So I think they're two different questions though. So Rachel, if I understand your question, because this policy hasn't been revised since 2009, I think you're asking in this on page 1, the second to last paragraph where it talks about applications being obtained from the principal. I think you're wondering whether or not this policy needs to reflect the process in which we're using now. So that's one question. And I think the other question, going back to your earlier one, is do our fees need to be board approved? I think the answer to that is no, because it's part of the regulation,
Okay.
right? Which is, I think, in the last paragraph of page 1, the terms, conditions, and charges for such facility use. But I think one could argue that it is a fee that's associated with the facility use, because you can't use the facility unless you've, and what I think Mac and Jake are arguing, unless you've allocated somebody that has expertise in the equipment, right? So there's probably going to be a separate fee, but it's still connected to the facility use. You can't, if this, then that. If I rent the facility and I need it and I need the sound system, I'm going to need to pay for the individual, whoever that individual is that can run the equipment. But I guess that would be in a regulation. So I do think, based on your question, Rachel, that we should revise that second to last paragraph to reflect our current practice. And whether that's naming the program or just saying the process is electronic, or at least part of the process is electronic, that we should do that.
Yep. I think you can keep it generic.
Okay.
And Susie, or for all, I don't have it in front of me. My internet's still a little wanky here. I can't get this policy open. I've been trying. There was one paragraph, maybe Mac, you have it in front of you, like a little bit down. It was just a couple of sentences, but I felt like it covered us even changing the rental agreement to say this, just to be sure that's
Yes, it's the one that says groups having permission to use certain facilities, that one.
yeah.
So groups having permission to use certain facilities and equipment shall be permitted to do so as long as such use is under the supervision of a school employee or other authorized person. So that's what I think you're asking for. And naturally, I think you're asking for that someone, I mean, certainly, I think you could perhaps argue that someone might do it at no cost, but I think there has to be you know, if you're going to be using our facility, then you have to have someone that's trained, and someone that's trained is going to cost A or B or C.
That's right. I mean, ideally, you know, the conversation Mac and I had is we'd like to do it twofold. One is when people have particular needs, like Mac was saying, we have, you know, somebody that we work with, for instance, for more intricate lighting, let's say. But at the same time, we want to build capacity with our theater department as a wraparound. We also would like to engage some kids. If it's more of monitoring the space and just opening and closing doors, we think it's good for our theater kids also to learn the back end of the process, not just the front end of being on stage. So we think this is a really nice foray in both ways. One, safeguard, you know, for the facility. Two, bring some capacity to our kids. Three, make sure we have the right people in when they're using our soundboard, light board, et cetera. So, you know, we'd work out that, I think, based on the need, but we'd at least like to add that into the contract if possible.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
Oh, just Jake, just be reminded about the working papers and the eligibility of what age the kids could be when they do that work. Because if it's during the school year, they must be 16, I believe.
Yep, exactly right. And there's only a certain number of hours, but yes, and
yeah, I'm just saying.
We did this, and yep, exactly. We did the working papers for the kids. We do them right in SLO, but absolutely, thanks, Karen. We would do that.
I have a question, Jake. So let's just say that whoever's renting the space is looking to have somebody who's trained in our equipment, and no one is available.
Well, I mean, the way that Mac and I talked about it, most of the people we're talking about, like for instance, this gentleman that uses the light board, he has several people that work for him, and they all are trained. So, you know, I think that I'm not envisioning that, but maybe Mac's a better person to speak to it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of this too, is like, you know, being able to get the kids trained so we can sort of add to that list of like approved people who know how our equipment works. So far, we haven't run into that issue, and I've told this year we actually saw an uptick in auditorium rentals because a lot of surrounding areas aren't offering their facilities for rental for the entire year because of COVID, and they never revamped that. So I've told everybody, like, as long as, you know, you get, and Joe Moritz and I met back before Jake was the principal, with then Principal Stacy Gross, and to talk about an approved list of lighting contractors, and there's really only 2 people on it, you know, so allowing the kids to be on it would be helpful, but I always tell them it's subject to availability. Like, if you can't get an approved vendor, then the date's not available to you, you know.
That's what I was going to say. It'd be the same thing if a room was booked by somebody else, you know, it's just not
exactly. Like if we don't have anyone that can man the space, you know, and that's for our protection too. Because what people were doing prior to me and Joe sitting down with that was, oh yeah, I have a lighting guy, and it's like her husband, you know what I mean? And then they come in and like everything's a mess for the concert and stuff. So we felt we needed to kind of vet the process a little bit, you know.
So Dr. De Silva, if I may just bring it maybe full circle here. So one, the ask for a site supervisor fee, the language is already in the policy to have a supervisor, so no change there. However, the schedule for the fee would have to be revised. However, that is not under the purview of the Board of Education because it is in the regulations of the policy. And then the next thing would be the second to last paragraph where it says applications for use of any facilities. That paragraph will just reword to show our current practice.
Yes, and I'll reword that, Rachel. If that's the only question, I can reword that before Monday's board meeting, if that's okay.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Or is there any questions, comments? Ken?
Oh, all right. No, so I was a few minutes late. I apologize. But this also applies to Tiger Hollow. I think I heard you, Dr. Greenwood, refer to it. So it's the facilities isn't just limited to buildings. It's also Tiger Hollow and the practice field.
Yeah, and so, sorry, my
tennis courts. The whole thing?
Yeah. So anybody who's using the facilities, we're doing this now. Dane's already doing this on his side. To be perfectly honest with you, I don't know what his contract looks like, but I know that, you know, this is a practice he's done. We've used forever because we don't want anybody opening up our sheds, et cetera, without, you know, we don't have so many people have the keys who are going to use the gators and all that stuff. So, and usually for us, it's trainers, it's coaches who are who are doing this, but we do have some kids who come in and do it with adults with them. And this will be the same situation. So there's practice for doing it. It's just always been at the outdoor facility. We haven't done it indoors before.
As a follow-up, I'm thinking specifically to the event that happened at the practice field a week ago, 2 weeks ago now.
Yeah.
Is that I'm presuming was an unsupervised activity?
That's the thing. That's where the Tiger Hollow is different than the auditorium because we can lock the doors. Tiger Hollow being an outside field, that was a pickup game, you know,
Okay.
outside of school hours, unfortunately. Unless
Okay.
we want to say no one could use it, but I don't think that's not our
No, of
goal,
course not.
obviously, as a community. But
Okay.
Great. Anybody else? Any questions, comments? Okay, great. So this can go to the full board for a first read with revision of the second to last paragraph. Thank you so much. Moving right along, the second policy up to review.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It was that the second to last, but it was also removing the reference to the board approving the fee schedule, right?
So the fee schedule, it just says that the terms, conditions, and charges for such facility use are found in the regulations of the policy. Let me go back to see if it said that the board has to approve the fee schedule.
It says approved by the board based on the annual fee schedule approved by the board.
Yeah, I see it there. Yeah.
So that we're going to amend that also.
Well, I'm not actually sure that we should amend it. What my question would be is how are we implementing this policy? So I think my recommendation would be that we find a systematic way to bring the fee schedule to the board.
Well, I mean, that can't be difficult. We do the reduced lunch thing. We do the
the tuition.
Yeah.
So I think, right. So if anything, I would say that should be implemented, not necessarily removed from the policy. That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Right. Okay.
And
So
what we would do is we would add.
So we just need to
Right. So it's a little bit, right. So it says charge the regulations. So I would agree that maybe at the end of each school year, just like we do with the tuition for non-residents, that we look at that fee schedule, see if it needs to be revised based on cost of living or expenses, et cetera, and bring it to the board for approval.
Yeah. So the new fees would go, maybe from July 1st through June 30th.
Yep. So I'll talk to Joe about that. I don't know that we can get that to the board by Monday, but maybe the first meeting in August.
Yeah. Or, I mean, I don't remember having done one yet. So we can start it for the 22-23 school year.
I think the last time we actually did do it, Ken, may have been when we were discussing the bank accounts and facility use. That may have been the last time.
Vaguely remember. Yep.
Yeah. No, November of 2020.
Oh, someone doesn't vaguely remember. Someone knows exactly when. November 2020.
Okay, so the next policy up is a new policy. It's called Improving Completion Rates of FAFSA. So as per Public Act number 21-199, boards of education are directed not later than July 1st, 2022 to adopt a policy to improve completion rates of the FAFSA by students enrolled in grade 12 or an adult education program maintained by the board. Shipman and Goodwin have drafted the policy before you this evening. It meets the statutory requirements as well as administrative regulations that offer suggestions for how to implement the policy. The suggested procedures are not required by law. So if we could just take a look first at the first paragraph here. So I would put in, oh, sorry.
Can we let Mac out and let Terry in? Terry Houlihan's waiting in the waiting room. I'm sorry. I had him.
Absolutely.
Bye, Mac.
Hi, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks, Mac.
Thank you so much.
Hi, Terry.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for joining us this evening. We're just starting on the FAFSA policy, the new one.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for your time. So just with the first paragraph here, we should input in the Ridgefield Board of Education, the board, understands that completion of the free application for federal student aid, FAFSA, is an important step in the path to post-secondary education and is associated with higher rates of college enrollment. The board is committed to improving the completion rates of FAFSA for students enrolled in the Ridgefield Public Schools. I know we have a lot of guests with us tonight, so I'd like to open it up to you guys. Perhaps if there's any information you would like to provide to the committee about FAFSA, or how is it currently approached perhaps in RPS, that would help us as we go through this policy.
Sure, I'll just jump in. So, Terry and I took a look at the policy, we read it through, and so we thought we would just give, or ask Terry to actually just give you a couple of bullet points on like how many of our kids are completing the FAFSA, what their needs base are, is just a little bit of background as to where we are as a district first. And then we took the policy and basically we just went through and made comments on the right-hand side of it. So Terry has a kind of a messy copy of it. I thought if that's okay with you, we could then project that up and just kind of talk through it and see where we're at. So that's what we were thinking, if that's okay with you.
That would be perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Greenwood. Perfect.
Thanks. So Terry, you want to hit the few bullet points that we had? I think you put together a slide, if you don't mind him sharing it.
Certainly. Just give me 1 second.
Careful what you share here. We're live.
Okay. Can you all see that?
In my mind, I love it.
Yeah.
Okay, so first and foremost, yeah, Dr. Greenwood and I looked at some of the history here, and essentially the FAFSA, without digging too deep into the data, it looks like there's been historically some low completion rates. And over time, it doesn't seem like the school counseling department has made any historical attempts to track the data. And the reason why I'm saying that is because in speaking with Irma Gallagher, who sort of organizes the scholarship application process, she said that each year, the students who provide the EFC, or expected family contribution, is typically very low. And as a matter of fact, when I looked at the numbers this year, only 15% of our students who filled out a scholarship application had essentially provided us with an EFC. And that EFC only comes from when a family actually fills out the FAFSA. So it doesn't seem like Ridgefield has a high rate of people taking advantage of the FAFSA. There could be a variety of reasons for that. And in reading through the policy, I know that there's some mention of a team sort of looking into that. While we were looking at this also, we also came across that there were potentially some lower numbers this year as well, because we do have a number of students who've decided to go into full-time work or even take a gap year, which is something that we probably haven't seen in a long time. And a lot of that is related to COVID. So that's some of the background information associated with the work that we had done. Do you want me to just go into sharing the policy Google Doc, Jake?
Yeah, I mean, I think just in a nutshell, we might be a district they'd be targeting because we do not have a lot of kids filling out the FAFSA. But what Terry's trying to show here is we also don't have a lot of students reporting an expected family need. So they're not asking for a lot of money in general. So it explains why they're not doing the FAFSA looking for scholarship money. So yes, we have low rates, but our kids are also not attending schools because they don't have the money, is what it looks like. Nonetheless, we should do the policy, but that's sort of the background to it. So I think, Terry, yeah, if you want to click on that and just kind of run through our comments, and then we can see how the team wants to follow through.
Yeah, so one of the first things that we indicated is there's this statement about the students enrolled in the district's adult education program. This is something that we need to get a little bit more information on. And in going down, initially looking at this, The bullet points that are identified are fairly simple to implement for us, predominantly because this year our developmental school counseling lessons took off. So the FAFSA task force essentially would be the school counseling team. And the way in which we would track data here would be through the developmental school counseling lessons, and also, let me move this, what's called an end of year evaluation and Naviance. The Naviance program is what students use to apply to college, but also to research colleges. And it's a tool that we can use to essentially assign surveys to them. The next bullet point, the FAFSA coaches, would essentially be the school counselors themselves. I'm not too certain about the incentives for students who have completed the FAFSA. As a matter of fact, we recommend potentially deleting that. The annual presentations to students, we are at an advantage because of the developmental school counseling lessons, but I would also suggest that we include verbiage associated with the parent presentation that we deliver typically in August. This past year, we used a financial firm that delivered information to parents, but included a very specific piece on the FAFSA. And the professional development to district staff, that would essentially be the role of the school counseling supervisor, who would update the school counselors as needed, and potentially even work with student life office in terms of creating a curriculum for the advisory, the 11th and 12th grade. I think it's very early to deliver information on the FAFSA to 9th and 10th graders.
So, I mean, I think this is all, we're not seeing anything here that we don't already have a handle on. We just would be firming up what we're already doing in the policy. And then again, I would make the recommendation of deleting the providing incentives to our kids in terms of spirit days, et cetera. That's just, you know, we're doing it as part of our curriculum. It's not an add-on like it would be in other districts. And then the adult education program, we just need to get the right language that we use in Ridgefield. And frankly, it just slipped my mind and we didn't have a chance to fill it in correctly since being gone for a few years. We just need to have a few minutes to sit down and put that correct info in there, the right language that we use. So I don't think we're in a bad place with this, honestly. Just if you give us the okay, I suppose we would just go ahead and fill it out correctly for you.
So I think, first of all, thank you so much for the amount of work that both of you have done on this. I think, so for the Board of Ed, I know the regulations are not in our purview, so I would leave that up to Dr. De Silva and both of you to go through. But I know the actual policy, that's something in which we approve, correct, Dr. De Silva? Or since
Yes.
it's a new policy, would both come before us or no, right? No.
I would think no.
No, right?
Just,
So-
yeah, we've never approved regulations. So I think that we would hold on to just the new policy. And I give everybody a lot of credit because this is Shipman. We received the model policy, I think on
Thursday. Yeah.
Thursday. So, and it's expected to be implemented as of July 1.
So thank you so much.
Yeah, we can be ready. You just, whatever the steps are.
Just a question, comment from the peanut gallery. As a dad who's been through the FAFSA many times, and the first time I did it was met with a 6-figure EFC and vowed never to do it again. I can see why our rates are low. Do we have a percentage rate, completion rate? Do we know what the low means? I mean, I'd expect it to be horrifyingly low because we're not getting any money out of this thing.
Yeah, officially, we don't have any completion rate. When Jake and I did look, we figured the best place to look was actually at the scholarship application. So what I shared earlier, that 15% rate. So that actually it's very low because the number of students who completed scholarships was about 220, maybe 221. When you look at the size of the graduating class. So even those students who are filling out the scholarship application, that's lower than the number of graduating students. So
So this appears to be another unfunded mandate where we're spinning in circles, trying to improve a metric that probably, well, may not be improvable.
Yeah, Shai, might not be in our community, but I will say what you're looking at the right-hand side on this policy, honestly, are things that we're doing. We're really just formalizing it for the purpose of the policy. So I agree with you, but it's unlike some of the others we've brought before you, not a heavy lift for us because we do it in developmental counseling. We do have the parent night already.
I get it, but we've already spent more time discussing it tonight than it's probably worth doing.
Well, and I haven't done my comments yet, Sean. So we got more time.
So to just comment on that, so many policies that we ultimately end up adopting that are required of us based on legislation aren't necessarily geared towards one community per se, but it's really or they could be more global, but it is to incentivize, I think, school districts not to neglect the population of kids that may not be completing this and then ultimately not necessarily going to post-secondary ed because they didn't have the money. So I think it is pushing communities again. Jake,
do you think we have a large population of people that aren't filling this out because they're?
I don't.
Right. But that's what I'm saying.
Right. But it's intended to incentivize communities that may not be in the same situation that we're in.
So it's not written for us, but we have to do it anyway. That's called an unfunded mandate.
Yes. The good news is we do a lot of this
Doing
work
it already. Yeah.
I'll add it to the pile of unfunded mandates. Got it.
Yeah, fair enough. Put it in that column.
Questions, comments on this policy? Ken, I can't see you, but I know you said
see his hand.
Well, not you can see my hand.
I can't. I have to
Doing
scroll.
it in stereoscope. No, so I was just echoing Sean's point on this one. For our district in particular, this seems like a mandate in search of a problem. And it's not really there because we're doing it already, which is good. I agree with you, Dr. Greenwood, on the incentives, but just be careful that it's not part of the statute that you're required to do an incentive of some sort before we remove it. That would be, so if we're basing this on because again, if it's a mandate, it might be mandated that we do incentives. So we wouldn't want to.
Well, then I'm definitely getting onto Sean's camp because I don't want to do that. So.
Yeah. I totally agree with that. But if it's part of the statute and somebody, just
great
be careful,
point.
that's all.
Yeah.
I would just consult with that before we eliminated it.
Okay.
Because you can also do the incentive can be whatever we want it to be. So it could be something, again, maybe that we do already, or something that we want to increase the participation of. And so offering it as an incentive might be a way to increase, participation in a particular activity that we want to see more participation in anyway.
So the good news is that the policy, I think, uses the language may accept gifts, grants, and donations, including in kind, but then the incentives come in the regulation, which we have autonomy to shift.
Sure.
So we have to adopt the policy. We don't necessarily need to adopt the regulations as they are recommended. So I think we have some deletion there.
Yeah, I just wasn't sure what the reference to the general statute is. So if the general statute says you have to do it, then I think we have to do it, even if we don't want to.
So just to say, Dr. De Silva is absolutely correct. So the board may accept gifts, grants, and donations, including in-kind donations, to implement the provisions of this policy. That is directly from Public Act 21-199, Section 6, page 5.
Sure.
So just putting that out there. So I know we have a question about the wording of adult education program. I also had a question about the sentence after that. So it says the district shall develop a systematic program through which students are educated about the purpose and content of the FAFSA, encouraged to complete the FAFSA, and assisted in the completion of the FAFSA as may be necessary and appropriate. Should we include in there with prior parental consent? Because you're filling out a form for aid. Or do we do that now? I know we have very low rates, but.
For a reason.
Yeah, so let me give that some thought. So currently, Jake, do kids complete the FAFSA in school?
No, it's at home. We talk about it at school. Terry, actually, I don't know why I'm talking Terry, actually, about your question, but we explain it at school. We talk about it. We do the parent night. We have somebody else come in and talk to parents, but it's done at home with your parents.
Yeah, and the predominant reason why is the information that is required to fill out the FAFSA is typically at home.
Stuff, right?
And the majority of, quite honestly, the majority of adolescents prefer to do that, at least in our district, prefer to do that with a parent. And it does also ask for parent information.
Right.
That doesn't mean that students can't fill it out with us. As a matter of fact, was only one time in my career which I did the FAFSA with a student.
So the question that Rachel has, and when it says assisted in, that we create a systematic program where we assist in the completion of FAFSA, so how are we defining assisted? Is that assisted in that you go home and you sit down with your mom and these are the 10 things that you need to, or dad, and these are the 10 things that you need to have in front of you in order to complete it? Is that how they're defining assisted? Or to Rachel's point, is assisted, or maybe it's not Rachel's point, maybe it was my question, does assisted look like the child and the counselor are sitting down at a computer and they're completing it? So if that was the case, then I would agree with Rachel that we need to have language in this policy that indicates with parent permission, which I'm not even sure that we can add that. We'd have to talk to council. Or are we defining assisted in a different way in terms of here are all the things that you need when you go home?
Unless the kid's emancipated, you're not doing this thing by a kid and a counselor. This involves parent tax data, which I don't know a parent who's going to write that down for their kid to be bringing to school, but maybe I'm completely nuts.
No, I think that's why Rachel's asking that. Yes. And I would, because that language is assisted in the completion. I think the way in which we're defining it would not be assisted as in like, I'm going to sit here with your tax forms and
no, FAFSA is really intrusive. Mm-hmm. And that's why some people choose not to fill it out, knowing that they're not getting anything anyway.
Right. Well, that's why the government wants you to fill it out, Sean.
I know. They want to cross-reference it with other documents they have. No. It'd be easier if they just sent me a tax bill at the end of the year and told me what I owe.
Yep.
Rachel, was I getting at your concern there?
That was absolutely the root of my question. Yes. I mean, I'm going back to the purpose of this policy, right? So the purpose of the policy, it says it's an important step and path to post-secondary education and it's associated with higher rates of college enrollment. The board is committed to improving the completion rates. So not necessarily completing them with the students, but improving the completion rates. I think if council would agree, we could take out the assisted in completion, because if we are educating them about it, encouraging to complete, but then, I mean, that would be a lot of information.
I agree with that. I think that does fit under the definition of assisting them, but I think other things fit under the definition of assisting them, which we're not going to do. So we can be specific and not use assistant. This is the guidance we're going to provide.
Right.
I agree with that.
So I think what you're saying, Ken, is we would keep the language as it's defined, as it's written here, but then in, let's say, parentheses, identify what assisted means. Is that what you're saying?
I would do that. I would just completely leave assisted out. Like I wouldn't use it, because why don't we just say what we're going to do? Remove all ambiguity. Because when you do a parenthetical reference like that, often that means as an example. For example, this, mm-hmm. but that could also mean other things. We're just giving you two examples of what that means.
Maybe I'm crazy, but we're going to do all these extreme measures and we're going to get one extra person that's a lot of stupid form.
Probably two, Sean.
That's insane. The amount we spent tonight already exceeds the result.
So I think we have two questions on this policy moving forward, right? So we have one about the title for adult education program. And then the second question would be if we can remove the words "and assisted in the completion of FAFSA."
Well, it says if the board maintains an adult education program. Do we? I don't think we do.
Well,
So-
it goes beyond, I think it's referring to going beyond grade 12. And I think we have,
We actually do have an adult ed program. We're required by law to have them. It's done in collaboration with Danbury. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is.
oh, got it. Okay, good.
Yeah, and like I said, we just didn't have a chance to dig into like the proper name, et cetera, and to fill it out. We just needed some little time to do that.
The acronym is WERACE, WERACE, out of Danbury.
I knew somebody would know though.
Karen would know. That's who knows.
Ken?
I had another question because we haven't spent enough time on this. I saw I can't find it now for my question, of course, but I saw reference to college. Is the FAFSA, does that also allow you to get funds for trade schools, et cetera? Or is it strictly a college?
I don't believe so, Ken. Just my experience with filling these things out way too many times. Back to the Western Connecticut Regional Adult and Continuing Ed, that's a free state mandated adult education service. FAFSA does not apply to this. So I guess I'm really confused now.
So I think that's a separate. I think so are you saying, Sean, that the adult ed program, if the board maintains an adult ed program, that the students
we maintain an adult ed program, we were just told.
Yes.
That adult ed program has nothing to do with FAFSA. You can fill it out all you want, it impacts nothing.
I think I interpret it as if people are in it,
Yeah.
Correct.
then we want to get them to do the FAFSA as well. If they want to do post-secondary, that they know that they have access to post-secondary.
That's fair.
That's how I interpreted it, but
Okay.
Same.
Same.
Me too.
Same, Dr. Greenwood.
Okay.
which is a good point because I have no idea currently what we do. That's why you dig into it a little bit. We write into policy, then we got to do it.
Roughly how many kids do we have in that program?
In adult ed?
Don't know.
Would have to
Dr.
find
De
that out.
Silva, what would you recommend in moving forward with this policy?
So a couple things. I'll just make sure that we can remove the language with assisted. We'll dig in more by Monday, how many kids we have in adult ed. I think Jake is just going to make sure that he understands fully what that language means around the adult ed program, which I think it's exactly what we just described. And otherwise, I think that this one can go.
Okay.
And in my email, according to Wes, FAFSA does apply to trade schools.
Thank you.
If the trade schools receive federal monies.
Correct.
Right.
So perhaps that language should be included in that in order to encourage participation. If somebody's thinking, I'm not going to college, I don't need to worry about that, but their trade school might. So
I like it.
Inclusive.
So, Rachel, if this doesn't go on to Monday, it would have to wait till our next board meeting, which would be in August. So I think according to legislation, it needs to be approved by July 1. So we'll try to move this one forward, get those questions answered by next meeting.
Okay. And we don't have another board meeting before July 1. So if it had to.
Then we'd probably have to pull, if it was absolutely necessary, we'd have to pull a quick board meeting together to get this policy ready.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but even if it's not in our policy, if it's law, right, we still follow it.
Correct.
But
the law is saying that we had to adopt a policy by July 1,
Yes,
I think.
it is.
so are we going to be just procedurally, are we going to be able to do a first and second read in the same meeting? Or we dispense with the second read?
I'll have to look. I'm not sure, Ken. We might be able to do a vote in the meeting on whether or not we can then do a second.
Okay.
I'll look
That's
into
true. Okay.
Rachel, that has happened in the past when needed.
Okay.
That
It's not common. Yes, it's not common practice, obviously, but it has happened in the past.
Yeah, a vote
and
to
it really
waive a
needs
second
it-
read.
it's a vote to do a second read in the,
It's a vote to approve the policy after the first read.
Right.
gotcha. Thank you so much.
See, Karen knows, Dr. Greenwood.
Sure does.
All right.
So if you don't mind me clarifying, I'm understanding that Terry and I will clean up this policy and then get it off to you, Susie. Is that where we're at?
You can clean up the adult ed pieces. I'll find out about the language around assisted,
Okay.
Jake.
Yep.
And the last question was just how many kids we have in the adult ed program.
Yeah, we'll do some research around that in general. Okay.
And trade schools if we can.
Yep. I have put a note.
Yep. If the purpose is to increase participation, that's probably where we're going to get our increases from people that didn't know that they could actually use it.
And Dr. Greenwood, I could try to assist in getting that data as well, because Peggy Bruno, who oversees our adult ed program, does report to me, so I can reach out to her to see if she has information about that.
Beautiful. We'll be in touch.
Just as a general point of information, I think it would be very easy for the FAFSA to supply the data on how many kids from a particular school actually completed. So I don't know why that's such a mystery number. You just, how many?
Because Ken's obviously never spoken to any government agency before.
Well, no, but they're the ones saying they want it. So just
No. The state of Connecticut is the one saying they want it.
Terry, do you have that?
This is an unfunded state mandate.
Terry, do you have that information of how many kids apply? No.
No, we don't have it. Like I said, we were able to pull from the scholarship applications, but I can definitely look and see if there's accessible data from the state. I'm not sure that they would release that though.
Yeah, this is another state sanctioned one size fits all thing.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
I definitely want to, thank again, Dr. Greenwood and Mr.
Yes.
for coming on this evening and answering all our questions and doing all this heavy lifting just in a couple of
Short
days.
amount of time.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Agreed.
We're going to move on, guys, to the next policy. So it is policy 6172.1, gifted and talented student program. Just a slight correction. So this is a CAPE version, not a Shipman and Goodwin version policy. As per the recent update in Section 2 of Public Act 21-199, local and regional boards of education are required to develop a policy not later than July 1st, 2022 for the equitable identification of gifted and talented students. I must give credit to Ms. Gillette and her curriculum team who have reviewed and provided their edits for us this evening on this policy. In the first paragraph here, just to read it aloud, we can insert Ridgefield. The Ridgefield Board of Education, the board, recognizes its responsibility to identify gifted and talented students within the school district and to provide these students with appropriate instructional adaptations and services. Districts are required to identify, but the provision of services is at the discretion of the local district. That last sentence here is as per Connecticut General Statute 10-76D-1. Before continuing on with questions and comments, I do believe it's important for all of us and the community to be educated on the identification process of gifted and talented students and the delivery of educational programs provided. So would anyone on the administrative team like to jump in?
Jeff is here to answer any questions, and if we need Linda, she can hop on.
I can also help historically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeff, you want to start off?
Yep, I'll be happy to start. Yeah. So, this policy, Rachel made it really clear. It's about the identification of gifted and talented students. So just for everyone who's listening out there, who might be listening, the identification of gifted and talented is really part of the placement and the planning and placement team, the PPT process. So there's lots of ways that you could identify that label of gifted and talented student. It could be through extraordinary academic feats or abilities. It could also be through the creative arts. So there's really two sides of gifted. Giftedness is not just a single number based on an IQ, right? There's a lot of ways to represent giftedness. And there's a lot of different tests in order to identify giftedness, which could be, it could be academic achievement, it could be aptitude tests, intelligence, and then that creativity. So it could be achievement scores, it could be work samples, it could be pieces of art. And it really could be based off of parent, student, teacher recommendations. They're all appropriate measures as part of that process. But it is really important for everyone to understand that it must be done as part of the PPT process. So I know in terms of the policy, that the CAPE draft policy, part of what I know was stricken out, some of that language was due to the fact that since it is part of the PPT process, the explanation of how a student is identified would be part of that process. Contact information for if a student is identified and the services that we provided would be part of that PPT process. So the thought and the logic behind this, the way this policy is written and why some of that language is stricken from the draft, is that it would be part of the PPT process anyway, so not necessary to be written specifically in this specific policy. But I think it also is important for everyone to realize that the school district, I think that sentence in the last paragraph, the school district, should it decide to offer services to gifted and talented, she'll use the State Department guidelines, but it's that key language of should it decide to offer services. So really state statute is about, we have to identify, and then it's really up to the district about what services we would like to provide based on budgetary constraints and other needs. Liz, was there or Dr. Henry, anything else that you wanted to add to that?
No, I mean, really just more to the point that technically giftedness falls under child find, or the same child find obligations that we have through special education for students with disabilities. And we are fulfilling those child find obligations now. So the way the process works now, no different than, excuse me, if a student is suspected of having a disability, they're referred to the planning and placement team through a gifted referral. A team meets with the family, reviews the performance, determines if there's enough suspicion of giftedness to do a formal evaluation. They tailor the evaluation to the areas of suspected giftedness, and then they conduct the assessments and then determine if the student's eligible. And if so, we create what's called a differentiation plan for them, in which we specify, what experiences do we think would be appropriate for them, given their profile and their performance. So we don't have a gifted program in district per se right now. And really you see the vast majority of the differentiation plans at the elementary level, because at the secondary level, we see students, at least from an academic standpoint, students in these situations really optimizing acceleration options of higher level classes, at least from an academic standpoint, to meet a lot of their needs. And then the same thing within the performing arts. But we would also, they maintain their gifted status and maintain their differentiation plan. It's just the vast majority of it at secondary is accommodated through the vast course offerings.
Excellent. Any questions from policy members? I want to thank Mr. Corbishley and Dr. Hanaway for the explanation. I think that was really thorough. And if you guys look at the policy, I mean, it goes through exactly what they just said: the PP, the creative arts, educational program, multiple measures, talks about final determination. It also goes into early identification and then guidelines to follow. So are there any questions, comments? So I think this can go to the full board for a first read Monday evening. Excellent, thank you all. And for the last policy on the agenda this evening, this is a new policy. Again, this is called Advanced Course or Program and Challenging Curriculum. As per recent update, Section 3 of Public Act 21-199, it requires each local and regional Board of Education to adopt a policy or revise an existing one not later than July 1st, 2022, concerning the eligibility criteria for student enrollment in an advanced course or program. Also, Section 5 of the Public Act requires boards to align with the State Department of Education in challenging curriculum. Shipman and Goodwin have combined these two updates into one policy. So if you take a look at the first paragraph, this would be the purpose of this policy. So we could put in the Ridgefield Board of Education. The board understands the importance of providing opportunities for students to enroll in an advanced course or program and offering students challenging curriculum in the Ridgefield Public Schools, the district. Would anyone like to start us off on this policy?
Ready, Jeff?
Yep. Yeah, I can talk about this one as well.
Thank you so much.
Yep. So this policy, I think it's really important that before we dive into the specific eligibility components of the policy, the definition is equally important about what it means to be an advanced course. And so advanced course, we are specifically defining it as in grades 9 to 12 inclusive. So this is referring to the high school programming. And you'll see that in this policy, this draft policy, there's a few different types of programs, some of which Ridgefield currently does provide, some of which as of right now, certainly we could in the future things could change, but things like AP, advanced placement, right, that is used in the district. There is a program called the Cambridge International Program, which we currently do not utilize in district. Dual credit or dual enrollment, that's like our UConn ECE program. So there are students that are involved in that, as well as the International Baccalaureate Program, the IB program, right? Our district does not have that program, but there's, that does exist in neighboring districts, not too far from us. And the other important definition, because part of what the state statute said in terms of eligibility is that enrollment in an advanced course or program cannot be based exclusively on a student's prior academic performance. So the definition of that is really just student has taken the grades they've received for the course and the grade point average. So it's a very straightforward definition, but because the statute itself says you cannot base enrollment exclusively on a student's prior academic performance, that just needed to be defined. So what you'll notice in terms of the eligibility criteria, that's the section 2. The statute does specifically state about the need to identify students in grades 8 and 9. So that's why the language is written the way that it is, that district will identify students in grade 8 and 9 who may be eligible for enrollment in an advanced course. You'll see some optional language underneath there, because I think the question out there, to the committee is really, a student does not, well, as of right now, a student does not need to necessarily be identified in order to be eligible in their high school career, right? I think one of the purposes of this is to open up eligibility. So we don't want to create a policy that if you're not identified in grades 8 and 9, you don't have access to this higher level, this challenging curriculum that they're defined by. So that's just some optional language under that. Again, and the same thing in terms of the eligibility criteria. So one of the bullet points is that recommendation from teachers, administrators, school counselors. Our current high school programming and 8th to 9th grade transition, students are given recommendations to enroll in certain courses. They are not placed into those courses. So once, a teacher may give the recommendation, but it is at the purview of the families, parents, and students if they want to enroll in a higher level course, maybe that they weren't recommended for, or a more challenging curriculum. So the recommendation is one that we really should include because that's what we currently practice. But the other optional texts there are things that we should also consider. Like we can't solely base on prior academic performance, but that certainly has to, should play into it based on a student does in prior coursework to show whether they have enough mastery to move on to more challenging coursework. And then the other optional language is really just about the district administration in its discretion to identify and publicize additional criteria outside of this list. So it allows, with proper notification, the ability to add possible additional criteria for students to be able to enroll into advanced coursework. So that's section 2. Section 3, right? We talked about how they were merging kind of these two ideas into one policy. That the third one is just the creation of an academic plan for challenging curriculum. So that is really the district will create a plan for each student who's identified in grades 8 and 9 to be eligible for that advanced course or program. So that could be, part of our counseling program, right? As we're talking about the recommendation process, students transitioning from grade 8 to 9 or in grade 9, if we're creating that program, that could really be done through the counseling lens of our current systems and structures. And that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what the draft policy is putting forward. So I'm curious other people's opinions, people's questions. Dr. Silva, I don't know if you had anything you wanted to add from your perspective.
I think again, from our district's perspective, we already feel like we do this work. So I think it was geared towards those communities that perhaps have structures in place that don't tend to all kids or offer those opportunities for all kids. So I think that we're ahead of the game here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to add to that, the fact that we, it's essentially open enrollment to honors level courses in the high school. If a student wants to enroll in it, there's no wall holding them back, if you will. So this is, I think, the idea of staying in line with the statute and the policy of what's being asked of us. But we don't have the barriers like some other districts may.
I think that was very clear. Thank you so much, Mr. Corvishley. I'm very clear. I think, so is it in the district's opinion then that, or an administration opinion, that the optional language underneath eligibility criteria, these are things, again, that we do as current practice so that we can include them in our policy as well, going forward for a first read?
Yes.
Excellent. Any questions from anyone? Comments? Questions on this policy? No? Okay, so this can go forward for the full board for Monday evening for a first read. I will definitely look up the policy about doing an approval. So I believe we can get that done. Before we go, I just want to take a minute to thank Ken for his service on the policy committee. You will truly be missed, Ken. Your collaboration, positive contributions, keen eye, and attentiveness in your role will be missed. But we will see you in person on June 27th for our full board meeting. But thank you again and for your work on the committee. And I wish everyone a wonderful evening. And with that, do I have a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Okay, Ken first and Sean second. Thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciate it. Great work tonight.
Thank you.
Rachel.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.